In terms of prepping for a trade war with the US, China has implemented several important steps. For example, for at least the past 10 years, the country has been shifting away from a pure export economy and reducing its reliance on sales of goods to the US.
The land of Arcadia.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you on Thursday, July 12th for this week's Arcadia Weekly Market Wrap-Up. Bit of a quiet week in the market, although some interesting developments. Certainly read some fascinating ideas about China today, which we'll dig into, that I think match perhaps what's actually going on, and certainly to the degree that you understand what is happening with China and U.S. trade relations, a complex issue these days, but we will get into that today and see if we can simplify it, hopefully just a little bit. First story we have here, which I talked a little bit about last week when the Fed released minutes from their last meeting, saying that they're concerned that letting inflation run too hot could lead to a significant economic downturn. And the quote from CNBC here: almost all officials at the central banks believe they should continue to raise interest rates on a regular basis. Well, the short version is that, yes, of course, it would be good to have a normalized market interest rate so you could have a stable economy. The only problem is they're getting concerned about inflation a little late in the game, because if they do raise rates on a regular basis, then you'll probably continue seeing more articles like this, which the housing shortage may be turning, warning of a price bubble. Interesting quote down, ironically, in the vicious circle subheading there. Supplies are increasing because sales are slowing, and sales are slowing because prices are so high, which is exactly correct. Because there's always a fair value of something. You could think it's higher or lower, but if you keep bidding something up high enough, eventually it can become overpriced. So that's the effect that you've had with all the printed money, and with interest rates rising. It's not an accident that you're seeing the turn in the market now. As long as more money is being printed, the prices can be bid up. But now, as there's even a minimal attempt to take some of the money out of the market, talked about Dave Kranzler, who covers the housing market a lot. I've written a lot about how when rates go up, you would expect to see trouble with housing. And certainly if rates continue to rise, then that's what you're going to get. Interestingly enough, the 10-year note is sitting around 285. A little bit fascinating given that Russia sold half of their treasuries in April. China's been walking away from the treasury market. Fed says that they are not buying treasuries. Of course, the speculation continues to grow that the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or God even knows what other unaccounted pools of money exist that are not publicly accounted for, are so far looks like my best guess of who could be buying. Because again, the rates would be going up if everyone is leaving the auction. So a little surprising they're not higher yet, but again, here we're still sub 3, and you've seen, maybe the NASDAQ aside, which hit a new all-time record high today, but you've seen some of the markets finally start to slow down, certainly in housing, some of the stock markets around the globe. And again, if you actually ever do get higher rates, which if the Fed is going to continue raising rates and unwinding its balance sheet would be the natural assumption, you'll see a lot more of those housing stories. So next on our list was interesting article. China has been preparing for a trade war for over a decade, and that's on altmarket.com if you'd like to dig in, by Brandon Smith. Although I'm going to go right to this highlight here that I found quite interesting, where he mentions, in terms of prepping for a trade war with the US, China has implemented several important steps. For example, for at least the past 10 years, the country has been shifting away from a pure export economy and reducing its reliance on sales of goods to the US. In 2018, Chinese consumer purchases of goods are expected to surpass that of American consumers. Interesting. Finally, more Chinese people will be using the goods that they make there. We'll continue on here. For the past 5 years, domestic consumption in China has accounted for between 55 to 65% of economic growth, and private consumption was the primary driver of the Chinese economy, not exports. So he concludes that the argument that China is somehow dependent on U.S. markets and consumers in order to keep its economy alive is simply a lie. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I hear a lot of people say how, well, China's never going to sell their treasuries, crash the market because they would lose money, which there's a sense to which that's correct, although I equate it to the guy who makes $50,000 a year and has lodged himself $10 million in a gambling debt and continues to double down. It's that choice of, do we write off this loss now or do we go deeper into the hole? Interesting to see some numbers and data here essentially documenting that they have shifted away from just sending everything abroad. So yeah, it's not, I don't think that China is sitting there thinking it's an ideal situation that the US economy and financial system and currency system, not to mention derivative systems and all the other manipulated markets have become. Yet when you think about, all right, if we are here right now and this is the way it looks, what do we do going forward? Certainly it'd be fascinating to see how this plays out. But again, all the signs are there, and interesting to see that China does have options in response to this trade war. Will be stunning to see how it plays out. Quick look at the markets today. Here are the cryptos, a lot of red, all pretty much still getting pounded, much like gold and silver. If we can pull up our, looks like silver just under 16 bucks there today. Although perhaps a different perspective to think about today, if you will, is that I get it, you know, prices are low, it's manipulated, blah, blah, blah. Yet, why are so many countries, not just on a retail level, but you have foreign central banks repatriating their gold, a lot of countries like Russia and China buying gold, diversifying their assets into gold. So certainly some groups that fit into that elite / insider level. And again, why would they be buying gold? Maybe we don't know exactly whether there's a reset or how this all plays out in transitioning to a new system. Yet to the degree that, again, here you do see a lot of the key decision makers, maybe not as much in the US, but in either case, if gold is just useless and outdated artifact, as Warren Buffett and others would assert, then why so many resources into mining, certainly in China, and acquiring gold? So I will maintain my stance that the prices that we see there, gold at $1,250, silver around 16, are artificially low. And I continue to get the feeling we'll see some movement in this in the second half of 2018. I cannot guarantee that yet, although certainly as I spend most of my waking hours looking for the signs, I mean, essentially the way I've always thought of it is that similar to Enron right before it finally blew up, if you were looking and seeing signs of what was going on, I always imagine that there would have been some indicators going off, perhaps letting you know it was close. And certainly that's what I've been looking for with gold and silver in particular. And for the most part, I usually say I think it's close, although not here yet. And I guess that's a good thing because it hasn't happened yet. But as you can sit there and read articles I've written or watch the videos, certainly all of the underlying fundamentals being in place, that it is still on track. That's what I continue to see. So with that said, leave your comments below. If you have any questions or would like to know more about any of the things I'm looking at or seeing, write that in there. I'd be happy to help direct you to anything you're looking for. And hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, share the darn thing. And with that said, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.
The land of our